From plan your work and work your plan, to plan your test and test your plans, this is the paradigm shift we want to bring into the social sector with the Lean Startup method. A sector that is used to stick to the plan for success, but we think that with the Lean Startup method, we can innovate in a faster and more efficiently way to social impact. The Lean Startup method can be defined as a set of principles and practices oriented to identifying clear hypotheses, designing small and effective experiments, rapid prototyping, running quick tests, and developing solutions in an iterative way using the data collected till optimization for social impact. In this sense, what we want to change in the social sector is the strategy and technique of plan, fund, do, to the strategy, the lean strategy of build, measure, and learn. We want to build minimal viable products, we want to measure our assumptions, and we want to learn from them in order to iterate and building block a social solution. Therefore, we can summarize the Lean Startup method in 3 principles. Principle 1 is fail fast, or everything is an hypothesis. And the call for action for you is to change from your planning mode to your testing mode. The principle 2, it's about agile development. And in this sense, the call for action again for you is to change from the plan, fund, do strategy to the build, measure, learn strategy. And finally, our principle 3 is about efficiency. It's about thinking big, starting small, scaling fast. It's about iterate and building block to success. It's about finding where to invest the less for the most result. Customer development is at the heart of the Lean Startup method and involves 2 stages, each one with 2 steps and iterations and pivots. When it comes to the first stage of searching, it includes 2 steps, which are discovery and validation. And the second stage focuses on the creation and building of the company. For the scope of this MOOC, we're going to focus on the first stage, which is discovery and validation, in order to discover a social problem worthy to be solved for social impact and good. At the discovery step of the stage of searching of customer development, our main focus is to translate our ideas into hypotheses, designing small experiments, and getting out of the building to collect enough evidence that our idea for social innovation is viable, even if it's in a small scale. If we are able to succeed and collect enough information that our target constituents and our stakeholders care really about our solution, congratulations, it's time to build a minimal viable product and go to our next stage of the customer development method, which is validation. If we don't collect enough information or our assumptions are wrong, then it's back to the board of ideation of analysis. And for this exercise, we have a slide prepared for you where we can really measure the financial viability against the social impact to really test our ideas for social entrepreneurship. In this graphic for ideation and analysis of social entrepreneurship, we have 4 options to help you to think about your social innovation idea. The first one is when we have the situation where we have financial viability but low social impact. And then you have to ask yourself, you're really building a social enterprise. Then we have the case when we have low financial viability and low social impact. So again, it's time to rethink your social innovation idea. Then we have the case when we have high social impact but low financial viability. And it's time in that case to think how you can come up with a viable business model to sustain that social impact. And the best scenario, of course, is when we have high social impact and high financial viability. And in that case, your mindset needs to change to the scale-up mode. At the validation or invalidation step, in the stage of search, of customer development, our main focus is to test our hypothesis and minimal viable product in a larger scale. And in order to do this, we need to avoid cognitive biases by declaring in advance our expected metric outcomes. And the idea here is to really test if our solution is able to deliver and get the job done as expected by our target constituents and stakeholders. If after running our experiments we have collected enough evidence that we're getting the job done right, then it's time to scale up and think in a way of creating a $1 billion project to foster societal change. But if we get some of the ugly ifs situations, we have two potential options. To really revise if we're conducting the right experiments, and then extend our experimentation period to collect enough information to really validate our assumptions, or we're going into the right direction and we have learned from this failure and we're going to pivot and change of direction to come up with a better idea. If your MVP for social innovation is ready to scale up, here are the 5 R's for scalable social innovations. The first one is readiness. Is your solution ready to be spread? The second one is receptivity. Are your target constituents ready to receive your social innovation? Third one, it's about resources. Do you have enough resources to sustain your impact? Fourth one is risk. Have you measured the risk when it comes to implement your solution in order to get the impact and the implementation right? And finally, we have social impact and return of investment. Are we really guaranteeing that we're going to create significant social impact for the effort and resources invested? We have been talking about the experimentation since it's the main driver of the Lean Startup method. So this means that we need to be able to measure that actually our assumptions are right. And in order to do this, we need to keep in mind what is a lean metric. And a lean metric has to be a KPI that is comparable, understandable, that has a radio rate, and help us to show a change in the behavior. So we can really prove that we are creating social impact with our social innovation. So let's recap what we have learned so far. That the old-fashioned way used to be to think in a social program, campaign, product or service, put a lot of resources into it, take a lot of time to building it, and then cross our fingers hoping to succeed. And now with the Lean Startup method, what we're proposing is a new way. A way which is built on having this idea for social impact, for social change, and to start building block by creating a minimal viable product, getting into the hands of our target constituents as soon as possible, testing, collecting their feedback, and iterate and building block to our success. In this way, I think, and the Lean Startup method thinks that we are developing a way to have increased chances of succeed. One important remark to keep in mind regarding the Lean Startup method and social business modeling is that in social sector, most of the business models are what we call multisided market, which means that the stakeholders of value are not really the recipients of the social value that we're creating. In this sense, what it's going to be very important to keep in mind is that we're going to need to develop hypotheses, experiments, tests, and collect feedback in order to guarantee that all our assumptions are the right ones for all the members in the social innovation ecosystem that we're trying to develop. Also, what is very important to keep in mind is that Lean Startup method does not just apply for testing things for our minimal viable product, aka our value proposition, or for the customer segments, our target constituents. It also applies to testing our assumptions regarding what, for example, could be the right delivery method as one of the business model canvas building blocks, and we should try to apply this lean thinking to each of the 9 building blocks of the business model to guarantee that all our assumptions about the right cost structure, the right revenue streams, the right set of key activities and resources, the right partnerships and customer channels, as well as ways of relating to them as our customer relationship strategies, are in the right direction. As a tool to help you to really show how this social multi-sided business model look like, I have shared with you a graphic that will help you to define on one side what would be the organizational impact and how would you create financial viability for your organization in order to create social impact. And the other side, where you can see in this graphic, is how you're going to actually be able to deliver and create that social impact. So again, remember, we're talking about a multi-sided business model, which implies that who are creating the value are not the recipients of value, and we need to build the right business model, the right delivery methods and the right value creation methods in order to create our social innovation and deliver it in a way that creates social impact for communities. So the Lean Startup method is actually about creating a lean thinking for all experimentation that we conduct for each of the 9 building blocks of our business model. And in this sense, some tips to keep in mind, for example, in our value proposition, is the value of creating minimum viable products. Or when it comes to customer segments, who are our innovators and early adopters? Or if we're talking about a customer relationship, how we can exploit social media. Or if we're talking about channels, what about collaborative logistics? When it comes to revenues, can we use different challenges, context, crowdfunding, fellowships in order to collect resources, financial resources, to be able to develop our social innovation? When it comes to cost structure, we just need to be very rigorous and define small grants for each experiment that we are creating in order to validate our social innovations. If it's related to partnerships, we know that the best way to create value in a faster way is to co-create, and partnerships are a really strength force for that. And when it comes to resources and activities, key resources and activities, what about the volunteers? What about donations? So keeping all in mind all these tips, we're really applying the lean thinking in the development of our social business model. So as some final reflections and solutions, what is really key regarding the Lean Startup method is that when we don't apply it to social entrepreneurship, when we fail, we really fail people. And when we fail using the old-fashioned method, we are really failing big, really making it hard to try it again. Because sadly, our society is not so tolerant about failure. Even failure means learning. So, by sharing with you this Lean Startup method, what we hope is that you take a position where you start small, and there's no shame in starting small, but you keep your vision big and iterate and building block to succeed.